War of the Worlds, The Resurrection. A novel by J. M. Dillard. Chapter 7. Harrison was tossing his ditty bag into the back of the old Bronco when the little Mercedes came roaring up the driveway and stopped less than a foot behind it. "Char!" He smiled warily and waved, then strolled over. Damn good thing she'd showed up when she did. He'd completely forgotten to let her know he was leaving town. By tonight, Charlotte would have been fuming. "I'm glad you're here. I was just about to call you." "I can't stay long," she said in clipped tones. "I'm on my way to a client's this morning." Harrison leaned through the open window on the driver's side to kiss her, but she turned her head so that his lips pressed against carefully applied cheek blusher. He noticed then that the Mercedes engine was still running. Uh-oh. He withdrew a little and rested his hands on the car door. "Okay, Charlotte, give it to me straight. Are you mad, or just mad?" "Harrison, how could you?" Makeup done especially well today to enhance the performance, Charlotte whispered the words with just the right mixture of coolness and hurt. No tears, though. Never tears. Char was always in control. He didn't try to pretend that he didn't understand the question. She was too sharp for that. "I'm sorry. It was unexpected. You know I didn't do it on purpose. We had an honest emergency at Pitt's." "I must have called your place 100 times last night. You wouldn't pick up the phone." "An emergency, Char. Read my lips. I just got back from the Institute 5 minutes ago." She searched his face. The day's growth of beard and the circles under his eyes must have convinced her, because she tried a different tack. "You knew how important that party was to me, to us." Patience Harrison warmed himself. He felt too weary to play this game now, and precious time was passing while God knew what was out there in the desert. "Honey, my work is important, too. I've got to. They want you at Bleecker Williams. Do you have any idea how much they're willing to pay you there? But the offer won't last forever." "I like what I'm doing," he said stonily. "And that's that." He tried to kiss her goodbye, give a hurried explanation, but she pulled away. "Isn't a fiancé entitled to a vote, Harrison? Won't you even discuss it?" "Damn it, Char!" Harrison took a deep breath and fought back his anger. In a softer tone, he replied, "We have discussed it. You know how I feel." "We haven't discussed it enough." She tossed her waving blonde hair back carelessly. It was an attractive gesture, one Harrison decided looked just a little too practiced. "We'll talk more tonight, over dinner. I've made reservations at Chez l'Auberge," but he shook his head firmly. "I can't do it. I have to go out of town." She reacted angrily to that, and opened her mouth to argue. But he spoke quickly, forcefully, in a seriously determined tone he had never used with her before. "Just overnight. It's business, Char. I promise. I'll make it up to you when I get back." "God damn it, it is an emergency, and I don't have time to discuss it now." He tried again to kiss her, but she pulled too far away. Firmly, he took hold of her shoulders and brought her close enough to give her a light peck on the cheek. "Try to understand," he said, then dashed back to the Bronco. The Mercedes tires squealed as Charlotte pulled out of the driveway, but Harrison forced himself not to look back. A horn blared outside in the driveway. Peering through the white shears in the bedroom window, Mrs. Pennyworth said, "That'll be all right now." "Are you sure you know where everything is?" Suzanne tucked a change of clothes into the hanging bag flung across her bed. "I know." the older woman answered firmly. "And what I don't know, Deborah can show me." Suzanne felt a twinge of guilt at that. Poor Deb. Tonight when she came home, she'd find her mother gone and a stranger waiting for her in this new, unfamiliar house. Thank God the stranger was this competent, pleasant-faced grandmother and not some 17-year-old kid. "I'm so sorry to do this on such short notice, Mrs. Pennyworth." "Not one more time may you apologize for that," Mrs. Pennyworth scolded in her faint Dutch accent. "I live only 2 houses away. It could not be more convenient, and how grateful I am Deborah is an 11-year-old girl and not some screaming 2-year-old. Suzanne smiled weakly at her. A tall, strong-looking woman, Mrs. Pennyworth was near 70, hair pulled back into a tight bun, but there were still a few golden-brown strands mixed in among the silver. Suzanne had gotten her name from a list Dr. Jacoby had sent her in Ohio. The list had also included a pediatrician, a dentist, and the name of the realtor Suzanne had purchased a house from. "Ah!" Mrs. Pennyworth looked out again at the driveway. "I see you work for Harrison Blackwood." She gave a knowing nod. "Now the short notice is understandable." "You know Harrison?" Surprised, Suzanne glanced up from her packing. "Did you used to work for the Institute?" In a secretarial or assistant capacity, she'd meant. "Yes, I see Ephraim told you nothing about me." Amused, the older woman turned her face from the window. "He is much like Harrison, always wanting to keep information to himself, making people guess things. I was director there of the physics department until I retired 3 years ago. My husband William also worked there before passing away." "My goodness, I should be calling you Dr. Pennyworth then." "No, then I was Dr. Templar. I used my maiden name for my work. Now that I am just an old babysitter, I think Mrs. Pennyworth is better. Or just Gerda for the parents." The horn beeped again. Suzanne would have sworn at him under her breath if Mrs. Pennyworth hadn't been there. She zipped up the bag and threw it over her shoulder. "I'll at least try to call you with my location and a phone number as soon as—" Good Lord, this was all so absurd. "As soon as I get to wherever it is I'm going." "I know you will," Mrs. Pennyworth soothed. "Try not to let Harrison upset you too much. He enjoys surprising people." This is one surprise I can do without, she thought. "Goodbye, Mrs. Pennyworth, Gerda, and thank you so much again." "Goodbye, Suzanne. Try to relax and have a pleasant trip." "I doubt it," she said under her breath. She raced out of the house at top speed, trying to beat Harrison before he could press the horn again. Too late. Another ear-piercing blast greeted her as she opened the front door. Harrison was standing by the driver's side, about to bend down and press the horn again. He looked ready to jump on a boxcar. Unshaven, wearing an old fedora, his tuxedo downgraded to the usual plaid flannel shirt and a rumpled pair of corduroys that obviously had never seen the hot side of an iron. As she approached, he reached for her bag without a word and tossed it carelessly into the back of the Bronco. "You didn't have to honk so many times," she said coldly. Boss or not, he wasn't about to get away with treating her so thoughtlessly. "Maybe you can pack a bag in 5 minutes, but I have a daughter to think about. I had to get someone to take care of Debbie. I hope you have a very good reason for this." "Damn good reason," he said. And she fell silent because he clearly meant it. "Can you handle a manual transmission?" The words came out slurred. She studied him closely. He was actually swaying a little, not drunk, which was her first thought, but totally exhausted. Her tone changed. "When I have to." "Good, you have to. You're driving." He handed her the keys, went around to the passenger side, and climbed in. She took a very deep breath and released it, trying to relax. But all she wanted to do was shake him and scream at the top of her lungs, "What the hell is going on?" The thought that Mrs. Pennyworth might still be peeking at them through the window held her back. She brushed crumbs and an empty granola bar wrapper off the driver's seat, then slid behind the wheel, pulled the seat forward a bit, and put the keys into the ignition. Harrison had already reclined the passenger seat back and pulled his hat brim down over his eyes. "It would help," she said calmly, utilizing every ounce of self-control, "if I knew where we were going." "Maps on the dash," Harrison yawned. "Routes outlined in red." It was there, all right, on top of an opened box of granola bars. Several scholarly astronomy journals, yellowed newspapers, and what looked like his doctoral thesis. She looked back at him to ask another question. Why? But his jaw had dropped slightly, causing his lips to part. For God's sake, he was already asleep. She picked up the map and found the red markings. Their destination seemed to be out in the middle of the desert, a several-hour drive. What on earth would they be looking for out in the middle of nowhere? Either the man was crazy or what. There is no or, he's just plain crazy. Sighing, she started the Bronco's engine. The Cobra gunship hovered over the Jericho Valley disposal site like a noisy insect. In the co-pilot's seat, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Ironhorse leaned forward and gestured at the pilot to move the chopper in for a better look. Whatever had happened, Ironhorse knew was not good. All communications with the installation had been cut off for more than 24 hours. Jericho Valley was silent as a tomb, and both the inner and outer entrance gates lay wide open. Ironhorse was not surprised to find the sentries missing. The Cobra moved past the entrance and dipped lower. "My God," Ironhorse said, but it was drowned out by the thumping chopper blades. In front of him, the pilot's head jerked back as he made a silent observation of his own. The barracks had been blown apart, reduced to a blackened skeleton of wood and rubble. Debris littered the yard for a 100-foot radius. A surprise attack, then, with no intent of taking any hostages. There would be no survivors among the 17 stationed here. The question was, where had their killers gone? Perhaps they were still here, waiting for the Cobra to move in just a little closer. The chopper flew past the remains of the barracks to the far corner of the yard where stacks of toxic waste barrels stood in neat aisles. Ironhorse frowned. Strange. The barrels were loaded onto double-tiered scaffolding, but only onto the upper tier. The bottom was empty, which made the structure dangerously top-heavy. Rack one up to non-com inefficiency. And then he noticed one of the barrels down on its side, oozing. Jesus, the place was hot. Good damn thing they'd seen it in the Cobra first before they sent anyone in on foot. The pilot didn't seem to react, probably hadn't even seen. Along a farther aisle lay the bodies. The Cobra lurched a bit. The pilot averted his head, sickened. Ironhorse didn't flinch. It wasn't an easy thing to look at, but he'd seen worse in Beirut, in Kampuchea. He motioned the reluctant pilot a hair closer and tried to count. All 17 were probably there, though the way they were stacked on top of each other, it was hard to be sure. Plus the vultures were in the way. 4 of them, feeding. One had a red strip of thigh muscle in its beak and was flapping its wings as it struggled to tear the meat from a corpse. What made it rough was the fact that even at this distance, Ironhorse could see the vultures had already plucked out the tenderest delicacy, the eyes. They always got the eyes first. Ironhorse had learned that as a kid on the reservation. He'd seen birds on lots of animals, once even on a man who'd gotten himself caught in a bear trap. They had pecked his eyes out, too. It was in the forests of the Blackfoot Reservation in northwestern Montana, just shy of the Rockies to the west and Alberta to the north. Rugged, mountainous land and merciless, it had taught him a lot. One survived by one's wits and accepted harshness, or one perished. The land took no excuses. It was cruel and unfair, and those who failed to learn its lessons died. His people still lived on that land, where they had struggled vainly against the encroachment of the white man with his train, the Iron Horse. Paul's family had fought against the train and lost, yet they kept the name, one who shoots the Iron Horse, even though now the train and the white men owned their souls. But not Paul Iron Horse's. He had seen too many men and women, including his own father and brother, destroy themselves on the reservation because they had forgotten the first lesson of the land: discipline, survival. If the only way for Paul to survive was to take advantage of the white man's system, the white man's discipline, then he would do it and take pride in it. He left the reservation for West Point. His first year after graduating, he went to the Olympics as a decathlete and returned with a bronze medal. His brother accused him of turning white and no longer spoke to him. His mother still wrote him but remained on the reservation in spite of his offers to take care of her elsewhere. Iron Horse told himself it didn't matter. What mattered was that he, Paul, had survived. In his own way, he had overcome his people's defeat. He had no patience with those like his brother, who whined when things were not easy, cried because life was unfair. "Of course it's unfair," Paul had shouted. "Life is always unfair, and the best anyone can do is try to even up the odds through hard work." That attitude had earned him a reputation in the army as hard-nosed, tough, labels he was proud to wear. He watched the vultures work for a while, the sight filling him with hatred. Hatred, he learned long ago, could be a good thing if you used it to motivate yourself and did not bury it inside, where it ate at you like a cancer. He tapped the pilot on the shoulder and motioned upward with his thumb. The grisly tableau receded as the Cobra flew up and away. They landed back outside the gate, not far from the parked personnel carrier. As soon as the thumping blades slowed, Iron Horse half yelled over the noise to the pilot, "Whoever did this is long gone!" The pilot, a skinny, freckle-faced kid who was still shaken by what he'd seen, blinked innocently at Iron Horse. "How can we be sure, Colonel? I mean, other than the fact that no one fired on us. It could be an ambush, sir." Iron Horse shook his head. "I'm sure. The vultures," he said enigmatically. It was true, to an extent. Vultures usually liked to wait until everything living was dead or gone, if they weren't too hungry. "Wow." The kid looked so round-eyed and gullible. Iron Horse was hard-pressed to keep his own expression grim. He enjoyed cultivating what he called his Indian mystique. The kid would probably buy it if Iron Horse pressed his ear to the ground and proclaimed that the attackers were exactly 75 kilometers due east. No point in mentioning the obvious clues, such as the overturned barrels, which would clear anyone with an ounce of brains out of there, or the wide-open gates. Iron Horse climbed from the Cobra to call his superiors and relay the bad news. Suzanne had been driving for an hour and a half, not even enough time to leave civilization behind, when Harrison stirred and pushed back the brim of his hat with a finger. "Feeling better?" she asked not unpleasantly. The monotony of driving in silence had worn the edge off her anger. He brought the seat upright and rubbed his face, yawning. "Much thanks." "You didn't sleep very long, only 90 minutes or so." 90 minutes? His eyebrows flew up. "Geez, I overslept. Usually I nap only 1 hour for every 5 I'm awake." She frowned, skeptical. "You're joking." "No, really. You should try it sometime." He meshed his fingers, turned his hands' palms upward, and stretched. Someone as dedicated as you, I'm surprised you're not already doing it. Makes it easier to give that 150%. He shot her a mischievous glance, which she ignored. Why don't you pull over? I'll drive. Fair enough. She maneuvered the Bronco into the right-hand lane and pulled into an Amoco station. Pull her up to the self-serve, super unleaded. She did so. Harrison got out, stretched some more, and filled the tank. After paying up, he crawled back in on the driver's side, wincing when his knee hit the dash. Sorry, she said. She never remembered to move the seat back for Derek either. It's all right, he said, rubbing it. He got the Bronco back out on the highway, and they rode in silence for a minute. All right, Suzanne turned to look at him at the first light. I've been exceptionally good. I haven't screamed or threatened you with physical harm or burst into a flood of angry tears, but I promise to do all three if you don't tell me right now where we're going and why. Harrison didn't answer for a beat. Is that all? She stared coldly at him and waited. A smile spread slowly over his face. Okay. I admit to being a little uncommunicative, but I was preoccupied. Here goes. He took a deep breath. Last night, Norton picked up a radio broadcast signal from the location pinpointed on our map there. She shrugged. Out in the middle of the desert? I figure it's some type of military installation. What's so unusual about that? Plenty, Harrison replied. He removed the hat, set it on the dash, and absently ran his fingers through his short, golden-brown curls. For starters, the signal was a powerful one, directed at a point somewhere in the constellation Taurus. But that's the same thing Norton's transmitter is doing, isn't it? She frowned, unable to see what was so earth-shattering about the fact. Broadcasting signals into space to see if anyone's listening? If anyone else were doing this type of work out in the desert so close to us, I'd know about it. It's hardly classified. He paused and glanced briefly at her with those intense pale blue eyes of his, then stared back at the road. There was no amusement in his eyes or voice now. This signal, he nodded at the map on the dash, was answered. What? It came out as a gasp. Her first instinct was to giggle at the outright absurdity of it. That's impossible. First, radio waves can't travel that fast. It would take years for that to happen. I know, Harrison said calmly. But the fact is, it happened. Norton has the computer printouts. He showed them to me. They show first a signal originating from our spot in the desert, and then being mimicked, amplitude for amplitude, by a second signal coming from the Taurus constellation. Another signal, another mimicked response. Then what follows looks suspiciously like a friendly little chat. He patted his breast pocket. Norton made me a recording of the actual signals. They traveled in silence for a while, and then she asked, Harrison, in all honesty, what do you expect to find there? Little green men? I don't know. He hesitated, then said in a quiet voice that made her shudder, I know what I hope to God I don't find.